Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames and messieurs, welcome to Bit Podcast. The name of the channel at the end of the day is the name of the show. And this week, I am joined by none other than David Gornoski returning to the show, and Mimetic Value also returning to the show. Here's a little bit of backstory, folks. Last week, Mimetic Value, or Q, and I sat down and had a talk, but I had multiple audio issues that garbled up the episode, so I decided not to release it. It's over there on the members only portal if you want to pay $2 and check it out and try to ignore my bad audio. But so I talked to Q afterwards and said we got to record. But what hit me was in that conversation we originally had, David, your name came up quite often, specifically around your comments about Western men being haunted by the cross. And I thought that if we could get you on to further discuss that, that would be a good thing, because we are here today to discuss the Mimetic cross, specifically Girard's comments and theories surrounding Christianity, specifically the cross, the resurrection, the crucifixion and the resurrection of Christ, and how that breaks both the scapegoat mechanism and myth as we know it, which I think is important to understand, specifically the scapegoat. I get quite a few comments from on X from people who follow the show, and a lot of people will point to things as the scapegoat or have questions about the scapegoat. It's a very simple concept, but I think it's one of those things that gets easily misunderstood, especially in terms of the breaking of it. Because people see it being used and they're like, well, if it's broken, why do they keep using it? We saw this with the unvaccinated during COVID, certainly with Donald Trump. There's a current tie-in with the conviction of Trump and how that's just not working the way that people kind of want it to work. But we can get into all that as well. Gentlemen, before we get into the main of the conversation, please introduce yourself to the audience and we will go from there. Mimetic Value, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Mimetic Value, also known as Q. And yeah, I've been reading Girard for quite a few years now, maybe since like 2016, starting from right when Trump was first elected. And then that was when I first started to get deep into philosophy. And back then I was still kind of like atheist or at least agnostic. And really, Girard and a couple other philosophers were my entry into religion and really taking Christianity seriously for the first time. And however, like for many years after that, I still wasn't quite convinced that Christ was the only way. And then it was only in the last couple months when I really kind of just went through all the other religions and said, no, they're not as comprehensive as Christianity. And particularly a talk with David maybe about a month ago really just like solidified it for me, was the idea of Christ hauntedness.
And that was like our own little mini Christian vacation Bible school we did together.
Yeah.
Just in time for the summer too. But Q also was behind the QAnon phenomenon, and that's where that Q concept came into fruition. And
we got them, folks.
You do get a piece of royalty, don't you, on them Q t-shirts that those guys wear at the Trump rallies?
Yeah.
That's very good. Now who was the guys that sabotaged the stream that you guys were doing? I want to know if somebody put a fatwa on Q, because boy, he's been taking some arrows from some of the Muslim guys on X. I mean, those guys I've been seeing them going after Q, and Q's dodging them left and right. And
I wouldn't. I'm not discounting the possibility of Iranian cyber hackers.
Somebody fatwa'd you? My gosh,
it is possible.
Yeah. It's got to be Iranian though, not the ones that we like in Saudi Arabia.
No. We're talking about the bad ones. Yeah, the bad guys. Yeah.
Well, Q you've been talking about mimetic theory for what? Since what, 2020, 2016, 18? What was it?
Yeah, 2018 was when I first really got on Twitter. I still call it Twitter rather than X. X just feels weird. I got on because at that point I was talking a lot to Martyr Made, and he's kind of like one of my philosophy mentors. He was recommending books to read. And originally we started talking on Facebook, which I no longer use. And around 2018, he just kind of moved over to Twitter full time.
Yeah.
I started tweeting as well.
Yeah, I've had Martyr Made on the show, and well, he loves to talk about a long discourse in history about these random obscure cannibalistic tribes in some random island in the Pacific. God, he'll go for 7 hours straight talking about the way they flossed their teeth with the membranes of somebody's tissue. Good stuff, man. I can't keep track of those kind of details, but that's important. You got to have details like that. A lot of people like details. I think that's one of the things that I don't understand. There's a part of human nature that they really like details being recited in really minute ways, because like I've noticed, like the successes of programs like Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, they spend a lot of times, Rush did, talking about the minute details of every scandal. This guy said this. This one was accusing this one of that. On the third day, this one did this, and then this one taped that one, and then went to Congress and lied under this, and this senator did that, who was a member. They love those little details, and it seems like a lot of people like to hear details about things. That's something I'm not really good at. You know what I mean? If you ask me, what I did today, I can barely recall sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a broad sketch kind of guy quite often, and actually, it's always a challenge in writing, because I always find like I start from the broad concept, and when I start getting into the granular, that's usually where I'm like, ooh, okay, well, what do I mean? How do I prove this? Am I just talking about my ass? Probably, but
in the beginning of time,
yes,
right?
yes.
Here we go.
Yeah, I think all three of us are very much abstract thinkers rather than getting into details. Do you know you guys is personality types?
What is it?
You mean the
there's like the Myers-Briggs Big Five, whatever. They're all kind of useful, but also not fully perfect models.
It's one of those where you're graded on, David. It's like high in openness, and it's very Peterson. Peterson was big on these things because he had developed his own version of it or something like that. And there's another one where it gets into, like, I forget what it's called, like they have these weird little acronyms that attach themselves to certain. It's essentially like autistic horoscopes. That's really what it comes down to. It's like astrology for autists.
Yeah. Well, I think it's valid because it's like looking at your, like, how you actually think about things, right? So I think we're more like intuitives than sensors. So sensors are kind of like the ones who care more about the sensory details, right? So we care more about the abstract concept. So I think there is like a divide there where it's true. However, it's just that most of the tests online or otherwise aren't very good, and the categories are kind of more blurry than as concrete as some of the.
Let me put it this way, Q. This is kind of how I feel about it. If you need an online test to tell you how you think, then you're not someone who really thinks, because you should be thinking about how you think. Like, I don't need something to tell me how I am. I'm like, I know how I am. I'm me. This is the project. I inhabit me all the time. I'm constantly checking in on me. I'm trapped in my head half the day. Like, it's once you attach. What I find is that when you attach these acronyms to yourself, you then start to become the acronym, and you're trying to fit yourself into this model, even if you're like, well, I don't know if I'm that open.
It's kind of left brain. It's a left brain attempt to try to put control on things. You know what I mean? Have you ever followed Ian McGilchrist stuff?
Mm-hmm.
I know the
Ian
name.
McGilchrist,
Yeah,
he wrote The Master and His Emissary, which is like a 900-page book about all the different things that the left and the right hemisphere brains do differently and how they work together. And boy, he loves bashing that left hemisphere. You know, he says it is needed, but it is a very sorry lot of our hemispheres. And he's always just bashing it. The right hemisphere is very empathetic, while the left hemisphere is very selfish and rude and disrespectful to others. I'm like, dude, what is going on with you and your left hemisphere? Who is speaking? Is it your left or your right? Is this an attempt to defame the left? What if his book is a conspiracy? It's actually the left brain hemisphere that is the angelic one that brings everything together holistically. And this is all a diabolical plot to scapegoat the other side.
The left, the scapegoating
Yeah,
the left
I mean,
I think so.
Yeah, you definitely need both, right? And these models for psychological personality types, I think they're just like a bit useful, but don't like get too attached into them.
Well, that's an interesting way you say it, though, right? Like you need both. You need both. It's like no, you have both.
Yeah.
Whether you need it or not, you have it. Like it's like well, in some ways, to get back to Christianity, it's like we have sin. It's not something that we need or don't need, or want or don't want, or desire or don't desire. It's something that we just have, and we have to deal with it. And in these attempts to kind of diffuse it or shuffle it away or make it something else that it isn't, it doesn't get rid of it. It just puts it in the corner so it can magnify in the background. And then all of a sudden, all these bad things start happening in your life. You're like, what happened? And you start blaming other people. Yeah. It's not you. Oh, it's not my sins of pride and vainglory. No, it's the algorithm. It's this, it's that. It's whizzle wazzle. It's Trump. Who knows, right? It's the Jews. It's this group. It's that group. It's you. It's all a reflection of you and how you're operating and moving in the world. And to go back to the scapegoating mechanism, this is why it's broken and why I think we're in this period of nihilism because of the anti-cathartic nature of the scapegoat that we keep turning to constantly in times of crisis, but we're not getting what we're supposed to get from it.
Yeah,
which is in a classic sense, the scapegoat is selected to be the bearer of all ills. That scapegoat is eliminated through sacrifice or expulsion or whatever means. The all the things that were attached to it go away, and it's almost like a miracle. Things just get better. People feel better. The mimetic contagion of violence has been resolved, and people can go back to rebuilding it in some ways. The Christ introduces the idea of the innocent victim, and once you have the innocent victim somewhere playing in your background, you no longer can attain the catharsis of the scapegoat because something eats at you.
Yeah, I'd like to get this idea over to Owen Benjamin because I've seen him just racking his mind over years about the victim stuff. He gets really angry about the victim stuff, and he thinks everybody says they're a victim, and he's just running around in circles, and he's getting mad at the ideological Christians, which I can sympathize with him on that, but I think he needs to have that victim, the haunting of the victim stuff that he's seeing. He needs to have that properly situated so he can let go of his grievances a little bit and just kind of receive the truth of the revelation of God, which is, ultimately, if you're going to be an artist, which we all are called to be, if we're going to be Christians, we're going to imitate a performance artist, which means we got to do something. Our lives will be art at the very least, which is everything, if you're going to be an artist, you have to be kind of a detective. And if you're going to be a detective, that means you're going to be able to follow in the footsteps of Christ. And really, to me, I am fascinated by Christianity in a way that I wish other people, and I don't know, maybe I'm stepping an assumption here, but I wish other people could see the feeling of fascination that Christianity provides me, instead of it just being another ideological tribe that they kind of, okay, I'm part of this and this is what I am, and I fight you about how your Pope is wrong and mine is right. I am so tired. That's not the fascinating feeling I feel. The fascinating I feel is feeling like you're uncovering a really fascinating, exciting murder mystery or something like Twin Peaks. I feel like my life is like Twin Peaks whenever I follow Christ. It's like looking at the bizarreness of the world, looking at the patterns, and then like finding the beauty and the sorrow and all that mixed together, and then like expressing this something that is so very difficult to put into words. That's what mystery is. That's what beauty is. That's what wonder is. And I want wonder back. I want people I want wonder to be brought back into reality. If you look at Generation Z, there's no wonder there, right? You look at the people that look like Nick Fuentes and these guys, there's no wonder. It's all about, we figured it all out. Nothing surprises us. They talk about 9/11 as an inside job, like it's passe and all this stuff. Like they're just too cool, too cynical. There's no wonder. But that's not Christianity. So if you're in that state of mind, you're not putting on the mind of Christ, right? If you're putting on the mind of Christ, now you see the wonder. You see the wonder of nature, the wonder of history, the wonder of the future. Christianity is the religion of the future. So when you imitate the way of Christ, you are literally imitating the way human beings will be like in the future on earth. You're like an ambassador from the future now, and you get to become part of it. And that's something that's hard for people to wrap their minds around, because they think Christianity is a failure, because they think it's an ideology from a book, and it's not. And so, that's where you get into all the disconnect that we have today. When I talk about, when I posted that Trump going to prison will be the biggest thing to bring down his opponents. And I said, go and understand what this means. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. And somebody commented, don't you compare, Trump to Jesus Christ. And I'm like, oh my God, that's that Cartesian ideological version of Christianity that gets that left brain thing that gets superimposed onto something so much more beautiful, right? Is that, the whole point of what Jesus is saying, he's not creating himself to be a museum piece where you can't talk about I'm the cornerstone. Nobody can be the cornerstone but me. No, he's, what I mean? It's so stupid. That's how all these ideologies are, they're all built on these little hierarchies of neediness, and it's like Christianity is not like that. It's like this thing that you can get involved with, and you can see the art of history unfolding, and you can kind of like see how it's moving. You can watch the plot, and you get to kind of like have this really wonderful opportunity to play a role in it in some little small way. It's really cool. And you get to kind of like play your character on this serial sitcom or whatever you want to call it, murder mystery, Twin Peaks. You get to play your character really well or play it badly, right? Then one thing I wanted to say, Jason, I was thinking about Christianity recently, and I keep coming to this idea that people say, well, we can't do this or we can't do that because we're sinful and we'll make a mistake, right? We'll make a mistake. And if we make a mistake, well, that's a sin. That's missing the mark. And I thought about it. I'm like, well, the biggest mistake we ever made as humans was the cross, but that was the greatest thing that happened to us. So, like, what do we have to lose but to try to do something great for Christ, right? You know what I'm saying?
The simplest prayer, and this I think speaks more to my Orthodox listeners. I know that speaks to me. When I was speaking to my priest about prayer rules and which prayers to say, and he asked me, what are your rituals? And I said, I say the Jesus prayer, which is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And I say that like I try to breathe it as much as I can. I try to say while I'm doing podcasts, I'm just constantly letting it filter through my mind to the point where I'm repentant when I realize I'm not saying it. And in that prayer it's the Gospels condensed into a prayer in the most simple prayer possible. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Mercy here is a dual word. It can mean both, please do not do the worst thing possible to me, right? Or, alleviate the worst possible thing, and or give me a boon, because mercies were oftentimes like given as, like coins to the crowd, right? So reward me if you can, if I'm deemed worthy. So Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And the sinner line there is very important, because you're acknowledging constantly that you're a sinner. You're not going to stop being a sinner. The saints are sinners. Like, you're not absolved of these things. in this lifetime. You repent and you seek atonement and absolution for your sins, but you're still here in this mortal frame. You're still imperfect. You're still fallen, and unless you attain theosis in the here and now, you're going to be a sinner. You silly little shit. So stop blaming other people. It's you. Like it's you who's the problem. It's you who needs fixing and who needs saving. This is my constant bugaboo with a lot of the evangelicals, where they believe that baptism is the end point.
Mhm.
But in the Orthodox faith, and I think in the Catholic faith as well, and I'm not trying to throw theological stones here, but I think it's a very important, critical thing to understand, is that in Orthodoxy, for example, baptism is the beginning. So when you're baptized, that just sets you down the path. Now you still have all the work ahead of you. You're not just dunked in water, therefore you're saved and you're good. Please go to the youth rally on Sunday. It's like, no, you've been baptized. Now you are a warrior. You're in the army of God. Like, now you have a commitment and responsibilities and all these other things that you now must do and take very seriously, because you're not just an amateur on the couch. You're an active participant, and you've also made yourself a direct enemy of Satan, because one of the things you do is spit on Satan and cast him out. So it's like you've got to take on the heaviness of that. The thing that transformed me from an atheist to a Christian was a spiritual experience, but the thing that led me to it, the aha moment I had, was realizing that God's love includes suffering, that these two things are intertwined. You don't have one without the other, because God's love is not a love that we truly understand. We experience it, we model it with our own children, we model it through our own lives, but we model it imperfectly because we are imperfect, and that's fine. But you have to understand that suffering leads you to it, gives you a deeper understanding. You cannot have joy without sorrow. We are, in some ways, the dialectic it's not that the dialectic is wrong or false, it's just incomplete. And when we introduce the Trinity, now we get the fullness of being that we can participate in, and that participation, that connection, is key. I've been trying to apply this to Marshall McLuhan's work too, where he says the medium is the message. This dialectical paradox. And what I started to understand through reading his work is that what was always kind of assumed is the audience. There was a name given to it in media studies they often called them the phantom, like the Holy Spirit. And they always had to assume the audience because they didn't have a way to connect to it. Now I have the chat going. There's my audience. I can interact with them. I know they exist. I can play to them. I can interact with them. Now we have discovered or formalized the trinity of media, which is the medium, the message, and connection. And what we're really doing here is building connection, and that almost the Holy Ghost of this thing is the connection to other people. Because otherwise, why are we doing this?
And that's what that means. The haunting of the cross is the experience of the Holy Ghost in society. Right. That's why when I had Aaron McIntyre on this week on my show to talk about his book, The Total State, I made sure that I put in the total state and its Holy Ghost undoing, because you can't, that's the thing that none of the new right guys really have. I'm sorry. I mean, that's why I'm doing what I do. I still have something.
Same.
It's like they don't understand that you can't just create some kind of Machiavellian political philosophy and that kind of thing, and that's just going to work. That's just as much of a fantasy escape of any of the libertarianism that they all came out of, mostly. You know what I mean? It's like they go from one fantasy to another, and it's like graduating from Pokemon. Oh, I don't play Pokemon. I'm a big boy now. Well, what do you do? I'm Dragon Ball. Okay, well, it's no kid. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, you want to play the big boy game, we got to have to listen to what Jesus and actually do it, right? And that's not going to it's not going to look as edgy. It's not going to get you your quick likes, because it's not fitting anything that the crowd is telling you already to do, right? And that's why it's so important for people to realize that following the truth is not going to be something that gets you a crowd very easily. That's the hard thing. It's being a detective is not. Have you ever seen detectives They don't. They have a lonesome life, right? They spend a lot of time away from people. They spend a lot of time drinking coffee and thinking. And I know that's movies. We're making a little bit funny here, but there's something to this. I knew a great detective named John Beza, who was Ron Paul's former bodyguard, and he ran the campaign's security. Before that, he was an undercover narcotics detective. And I mean, he can tell you some amazing, harrowing stories that are beautiful, but it took a toll on his life. I mean, instead of having Christmas with his family, he was, reading through these gruesome reports of serial rapists trying to solve this rape before this rapist raped again. I mean, this is the kind of life of a detective. And the detective role is similar to the artist role. You see what I mean? I want you to think about that. They're both similar. And Christ is a detective. There's a reason why G.K. Chesterton writes that Father Brown series, which is a metaphor of Christ. That's the exciting thing about Christianity, is that it's not a museum piece that we're trying to preserve and lock down. It is an ongoing investigation of reality. It's really cool. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more about this as well. Like for me, for my journey from like atheism to Christianity, I also think of it as like a detective story, right? It's like what Sherlock Holmes says: once you've eliminated all the other possibilities, whatever is left, however improbable, must be the truth. And that's kind of how I felt like when I was looking at all these other religions. It's like, okay, they have some valuable stuff in there, but something is not right about them, so I have to eliminate them as the true path, right? And then finally, when you get to Christianity, it says, all right, this actually encompasses all these other philosophies within it, because Christ is the Word made flesh. That was the kind of the mind-blowing epiphany I got in the last couple of months, where I realized, yeah, Christianity is the only true religion, because it's the only one that's truly living, right? It's the only one that talks about how Christ is made flesh, how it's the Logos made flesh, while all these other religions, like you said, David, they're kind of dead ideologies, right? They're based on some rules, some principles that you have to follow, or particular like set of rules, kind of like how in Islam they said the Quran is the uncreated word of God, but the Quran is a dead document, right? Like you can't just make that comparison between a book like the Quran and Jesus Christ, the living being. That's not even close.
David, before you respond, I'm just going to do a little mid-show grift. Thank you, everyone, for listening and supporting the show. Please like, subscribe, share, and continue to send us your money in any way, shape, or form you'd like to keep the lights on. You can also, if you go down the description below, we are partnering. I am partnering with Fox and Sons Coffee. If you use the coupon code 2bit when you go over to their site, you can get 15% off orders of $30 or more. It's a family-run business. I love those guys over there, and please help them. And we get few little shekels along the way. And I'll be introducing an apparel line sometime over the summer. So check for news on that and other developments as we go along. And again, thank you very much. I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, David, do you want to respond directly to what Q was saying, or do we want to get back to the cross as both a symbol and container of violence? No, it's up to you.
I was just going to say, I want people to really think this question over and over again, over and over and over again. We all know that, and I'm going to use Trump as the object lesson. We all know that Trump gets more power the more he's persecuted, right? And we just live as if that's a fact without asking the question, why? Why is it that in our society, the more someone is perceived to be unfairly pushed around, have we ever heard of a passage called "My power is made perfect in weakness"? The more he's shackled, the more his towers are taken from him, the more his money is gone, the more he hunches over and keeps walking, the more electric energy his character gets. I'm analyzing this as if we're living in a piece of literary art, because we are. It's God's story. And this character is not like God's character. That's a dumb left hemisphere brain approach to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you can see the art.
David, I won't stand for left hemisphere bigotry on their show.
I'm left-handed, so you know what that means.
I'm not going to let that go unchallenged. So.
But what's that?
But I think the right hemisphere controls the left hand, right?
That's right. That's what I am.
Yeah.
That's
why I'm going to bash left.
Yeah, he's bigoted towards left hemisphere peoples.
Well, I mean, that's what they do. That's what that's what our culture is dominated by, and there's no appreciation for the art of what we're seeing, and no one wants to really think about Christ as a perception of the way the world is, rather than And I told that to Q, and people might find that controversial, but I believe it's true that Christ should be the subject of your life rather than the object, because an object is something you can obtain and can control and grasp. You can't do that with Christ. Yep. He's wild. He's everywhere. Yahweh's the God of the wilderness. You can't grasp that. You can only be in the midst of the whirlwind. You can't grasp that and obtain that as an object. Now, there's objective truths, but Christ is, most importantly, the subject. You are becoming him. That is the process. And Jason, would you agree with me? This may be, I'm not sure. I don't look up everything. I don't ask the AI if this is a heresy. Is it a heresy to believe that theosis can also be a human species thing? Because that's something I talk about. And I know that people talk about it on an individual basis, right? That you have a process of becoming, like God as a human individual. But do you think of theosis not just as an individual or a church, but also that the human species is participating in theosis?
Of course. Yeah, of course. But the thing with Orthodox heaven and hell, this is something I got from Lord of Spirits, and it was one of those little things that just I call them like paper bullets. They hit you, and you're like, oh, that opened things up. The concept of heaven, really, in the Orthodox form, is that you become one with God. You're embraced by God. Your spirit becomes one with God. At death, you essentially attain theosis when you pass. And the concept of hell is those who bring their sins, who are so attached to their sins when they die, that their spirit is still enveloped by God. You're still in heaven, but you're burning in God's love. That God's love becomes almost painful and hurtful to you because you're attached to these sins, and that you will burn and that He's burning these things out of you. This goes right back to the idea that why God can never reveal Himself to mortals. There's only a very, very few select people they ever do it. He ever presents Himself to, and in almost all those cases, it's fairly dramatic. Elijah being one of them, but the concept of it is that God can't be around sin. God destroys sin. So if He shows Himself up to fallen people, He will destroy you. There's a great Onion bit. I'm not going to bother pulling it up here, but it's where a reporter is saying, we our guest today is God, and he turns the camera over, and it's like this swirling vortex of of divine celestial energy, and the reporter is like torn apart by being around him, and it's like, that would be like,
you have the mystery of Jesus having the fullness of God in Him and being amongst sinners, right? So that's a mystery. Right.
Well, no, but it also says, like, why did God? This is the transformative moment, and when you read the lives of the saints, I always recommend everyone get a copy of the prologue of Ochrid. You can get it online. It's the lives of the saints, and you can read them every day. And quite often, a lot of the stories are conversion stories of a young priest sent out into the wilderness to convert a group of pagans. One of the ones that stick out, I forget exactly who the saint's name, but he's sent out, and the pagans are like, okay, well, prove your God. We're going to throw you into this furnace, and if you survive it, we'll convert. And the priest makes prayers and wraps himself in his cloak and is thrown in the furnace, and lo and behold, half an hour later, he comes out unscathed, and he converts the entire tribe on the spot. These kinds of stories, and again, you can take it literally as this is an actual factual thing that happened, or you can take it more symbolically. Either way, the truth that's being revealed is that there is a massive conversion. that you have these pagan beliefs, and this is something I always throw to whenever I decided to dip my toe into any theological debates, especially with people who are these new Odin worshiper people. I'm like, okay, well, you have to go all the way, and you have to start sacrificing and eating people. You know that, right? Like that's part of being a disciple of Odin. You're just going to have to start hanging people to get trade wins and eat their flesh, because that's what people who practiced who worshipped Odin did. And no one really wants to go that far. But the thing that what Christianity does, and we'll get this back to the cross, is the cross itself is a symbol of violence. It's symbol of violence, but also the symbol of atonement, redemption, and salvation. Yeah. It's all three in one symbol. It's a container of violence. And what in the Jesus story, God comes down into mortal form, and God allows himself to be sacrificed by the crowd when he doesn't have to. He allows it to happen. This kind of humbling this is why it breaks myth. There is no other God before, during, or since who has performed anything close to that action of being humbled beyond our comprehension, and yet to redeem us and he does it for us. Like that sense of sacrifice, and that's why you have these people who've been practicing these religions for thousands of years, and within one generation they adopt Christianity, and what always happens? Cannibalism stops, human sacrifice stops within a generation. This is unheard of. People don't just change 1,000-year-old traditions overnight and completely change their makeup and the reality of how they live. Yeah, I've said one of my lines is the ritual and reality are one, and these rituals are hard to get rid of. They're embedded in us. And to get back to your statement, David, maybe you can extrapolate this more. Is that the cross haunts us? It's in our lives constantly. We are aware of our judgment, and it's particularly obvious when you see some of the bigger named atheists. Who is
Dawkins.
Lindsay right now is on a trip. Sam Harris, obviously, Dawkins, and you can see in them this. I think once you encounter these kind of ideas and you really look at their work, it's a fear. There's a fear driving them because they're aware of this judgment, and it's just constantly. They know it. Like they know they can't access it. They're in denial of it, but it's there. It is haunting them, and it's present in all their work.
Yeah, that's something I talk about a lot, right? Like atheism ultimately is just a form of fear, where like people think the religious people are dogmatic and they're attached to like a specific model or book, and they believe that's one of the atheists' main criticisms of religion, right? But that's actually not the point of Christ at all. And in fact, that's kind of like the atheists revealing their own fears to you, where they are attached to this very specific ideology, this concrete ideology about how the world works, and they're super afraid that you're going to break their mental model and their whole world falls apart. And this is something Shestov talked about a lot in his works like over 100 years ago. And then I also want to address what David said a while ago, which is like this subjectivity of Christ, right? I think that's super important. This is something that Kierkegaard always talked about in his works. He always stressed that you need to come to religion in this subjective way, which is why I also reject these like objective debates with atheists or other people of other religions about God, because it's pointless, right? You can't just give them the subjective fact and try to ideologically prove to them Christianity is true. You really have to experience Christ as the Logos made flesh subjectively. And this is why that like there's this paradox in Christianity where David talked about earlier, that's like the strength. Yeah, this is also one of the quotes from Kierkegaard. I don't have the exact quote, but he talks about how kind of like he who struggles against God is the becomes the greatest of all. So he says people struggle against man, against self, but then you also have to struggle against God. And where that leads you to is realizing the strength in weakness, and then the wisdom in foolishness, and the hope in madness, and then this is kind of the greatness of Abraham when he was faced with the decision to sacrifice Isaac.
I think we have to I want to think about that Trump thing again, because I think it's going to help people understand this faster, right? You give them something they're meshed in this story, and it can latch on to what we're trying to see. I want people to think again, why is that such a powerful effect, that the more one is persecuted? What other story but the cross as an inheritance of our society that we have explains why our culture, no matter how atheistic or godless they say they are, the culture vibrates around the sacredness of someone's perceived victim status, unjustly persecuted by a mob. It's so important. If you can't answer that, then we don't have any understanding of why history is moving, right? Only Christianity gives us the explanation. Christianity alone is the only thing that makes sense, because Jesus said this would happen. He said when he was walking into Jerusalem, and he gets on the donkey, he rides into Jerusalem, and they tell him, tell those people to be quiet. And what does he say? When they are silent, the stones will cry out. He was quoting Habakkuk chapter 2. Habakkuk chapter 2 says, woe to you who founds his cities on bloodshed and establishes his walls by injustice. The stones of the walls cry out. What he's talking about is immurement. This is when they would lay victims inside of tombs, inside of a building or a city or a bridge. They did this in the 1800s in Japan. They did this in the 1900s in Japan. They'd put a little 17-year-old girl and bury her in the bottom of a building of a bridge project over a rapid river, because they were afraid that the river gods would be pissed and might kill them. And so they wanted to give a token of love and gratitude to the river gods. Why do all gods do this? Why do they all need human flesh? This is how you know Islam just gets blown out of the water. It can't even begin to answer this question. It's in child's play. Mm-hmm. Only Christianity gives you an answer that God said, this is how you want to create religion. I'll dog walk your religion and own it and reverse it from within. Dear God, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's genius. And he solves the problem of death anxiety at the same time. It's a buy one, get one free deal. He goes and solves the problem that we create. He's like, okay, this is what you call religion. I'm going to walk into it, reverse it, deconstruct it, and I'm going to solve your problem of death anxiety as well. Mm-hmm. The two biggest issues, which is they're all wrapped up in together, religion and the fear of death. He gives you the fear of death problem solved as a bonus. That's like a bonus feature, like a cherry on top. Because if you were a loving creator, wouldn't you want to give your little creatures a sign that the thing that they get so bound up about is something they shouldn't be bound up about, including religious folks? Because I got to tell you, a lot of people don't live like they live. And I don't know about how people think about this, but Christians don't live like Christ is truly going to conquer death. They're terrified. And I think they do that as a way of keeping up with the Joneses more than following Christ, because they want to make their neighbor feel like, well, look how holy he is. He says he doesn't know if he's going to make it to heaven. Are you saying that because, is that pleasing to God? Or are you trying to please your religious friend that you're trying to show that you're more holy than? By saying, oh, God, there's no way I could get there. Really? Are you saying that because you really think that's how Jesus talks? Jesus talks with all confidence. Why can't you talk with all confidence? It doesn't mean you can still be extremely humble about your frailties. It's not a either or. You can have both. I mean, King David, we always take that example, right, of a guy who is named after God's own heart, and the guy was, making a horrible mistake left and right, right? But it was still enough that he said, this guy's my kind of guy. I like this guy, This guy's a tough cookie, But
Well, I think oftentimes, especially with the stories of David and in a lot of the stories in the Hebrew Bible, it's like you're the right man for the job that is being presented to you, which doesn't mean that you're redeemed from your fallen nature. It just simply means that you have a task to carry out, and you're the guy who's going to carry this out. That God is selective, and it's like I'm always drawn to stories of Jacob, and Jacob's an asshole. His whole story is basically being an asshole, a cheat. He's trying to subvert his older brother's inheritance. Always going his own way until he's brought literally to heel by Christ. By the angel of God, who the Orthodox always understand is Christ, and he's brought to heel, and given and rechristened with the name of Israel, he who wrestles with God, because that is part of our nature, to wrestle with the divine element within us that we are called to do, to inhabit and be, but yet we oftentimes get it wrong because pride gets in the way, or vainglory, or all these kinds of machinations of the soul. But again, this isn't like people have got to zoom out of this Saturday morning cartoon reality of good, bad, the dialectic, the constant dialectic. You're a good person, you're a bad person, you're right or you're wrong. The cross, I believe, is the perfect injunction of both, good and evil, and right and truth and deception. And there lies the cross. And so you can be good and wrong. You can be right and wicked. These things aren't what the modernists have done is kind of squash these things into, have flattened the curve, right? Have made being right good and being wrong bad, evil.
Yeah. But it's about wisdom. Wisdom is about balancing and having this discernment, right? And the Bible starts with law, and then it gets into the wisdom literature, and that's the trajectory that we're supposed to go as we mature in imitating Christ, is to move from a legalistic framework to one in which we have discernment and paradox, which makes it much more mysterious, much more of a dance, which is the way life is. It's not a science theory that you can predict and follow to a formulaic way. That's why go ahead.
That's the word made flesh, right? That's why Christianity is different from this other stuff like the Dharma of Buddhism, or the Mosaic law and Sharia law of the old Judaism and Islam. That's what they don't really see, because they're still waiting for their Messiah. They don't see that he has already come and he is the Logos made flesh. That's the mind-blowing thing that we always go back to. And your other point earlier, I think I always end up going back to Kierkegaard as well, right? Because when you said the average Christian, they're what Kierkegaard would call the mass man, right? Because they're just the ones who go to mass, go through the motions, but they don't really truly get it. They don't wrestle with God.
Yeah,
which is fine. I think you have to accept that there's always going to be the crowd. The crowd will always be with us.
Yeah.
Just as Jesus said, the poor will always be with you. The crowd will always be with us on some level, or certainly will be with us in our lifetimes. Let's get finite on this one, right? If at some point we are all redeemed and living in the kingdom of heaven, then there we go. But for the here and now, I always urge people not to worry so much about the crowd. This is constant. Let's say with the libertarians, is that the spreading of the message and this idea that once we have a mass of people, we're going to be able to do greatness. It's like, no, you'll just have a mass of people and have a mass of people problems.
They will fight like cats and dogs over who is the treasurer of their local libertarian county party. And it's a $50 budget. The last thing they bought was 2 hot dogs, not even kosher, with mustard, and they'll fight and try to kill each other over that, and then they want to tell us that they know how to give us freedom. Good Lord. But
It's the rivalry being.
libertarians typically, if you look at them, and I don't mean to say this to be mean, but I mean the Libertarian Party members, they look like the Star Wars bar. They look like the kind of folks that, the misfits and stuff. So it's little angry scapegoat types who are saying, damn it, one of these days we're going to join together and convince the crowd that we should not be scapegoated for our little weird behaviors. And once we can persuade the masses our theories are correct, they will stop hurting us. And it's like, that's not how it works, man. And then you find out that sometimes you become insane when you embrace that kind of, scapegoat resentment attitude that fuels a lot of that spirit of that culture. But that is the case for a lot of things in America. That's what I forgot what I was going to say. Why did I say that we have to not be afraid of making errors? Because the cross was an error we made and it turned out to be a wonderful. Well, that's what I'm trying to say when I hear people dialectically react to things like liberalism. Again, a very popular thing to criticize in the circles that I flow around. Everybody talking about liberalism. He just did, so he brought it up, so I'm saying it again. Why are we going to react to liberalism when liberalism's just the latest mistake that humans have made in reaction to God? God will redeem it too. So stop. It's not, doesn't mean we have nothing to do. We have everything to do. But I don't like how we're always, not you, but like there's this spirit of just.
You can speak of me. I'll
I don't know what you do. I don't.
I'll cut in for a second on this one. One of the things that and I'm kind of almost done with the project because I feel like I've said all I can say. But one of the things that started me on this path was the desire to break the liberal frame in me, the realization that I was wrong, and I wasn't just wrong about a policy or who to vote for or whatever little group. I was wrong about reality itself, and I needed to get that right. It was a very humbling moment. It was a very shameful moment. One that when I came through, I became a bit of a zealot. Saint Elijah is my birth saint, so I do sometimes channel. And I was like, no, I'm on a mission to break this frame. I want to break this frame in my mind so that I can get out of it and say, what the fuck is going on, right? Like, what is the capital R reality? And that led me to orthodoxy. And then as I've become more and more accepting, let's say, of orthodoxy and of Christ. Like it only hit me a few months ago where I truly became fearful of God. And in that moment, that's when I suddenly understood salvation. Like, because it always struck me, like, why should I fear God? It's like, oh no, it's not just fearing God as in I'm afraid of Sky Daddy. No, it's like you have to approach God as if he is real in the room with you right now, because he is, right? Mm-hmm. When you accept that as the reality, your behavior and your conceptual behavior changes. It has to. When I'm in my morning prayers, I bow before God, right? I present to God as if God is standing in front of me, because he is in every sense of the way. And by doing that, suddenly I'm not just dealing with an anthropomorphic idea of God. I'm not just dealing with a concept like, oh, better be good or else I'm going to go to hell. No, it's like, no, the king is in the room. The king is right here. You better bow down. Like, how arrogant are you to miffle or to present yourself in a slavish fashion in front of the king? Like, show some respect. And the way you do that is by respecting yourself, by understanding, by catching your sins even after the fact, and repenting. It's a simple thing. All these things are simple. The only thing that stands in between you and it to access it is pride. Yeah. Constantly. And this is, again, the story of the cross. God allows himself to be sacrificed on the cross for us, to be tortured, to be judged by a crowd, to be put upon a cross and sacrificed so that he can descend to Hades, harrow Hades for us, and come back and redeem us. Like, again, even if you're in the mode and I don't think anyone who listens to this podcast still can be on here, but who knows who encounters this in the future. Even if you think that's just a story, that's the most powerful story ever told, and has never been as many times. Sorry, David. And as many times they try to retell it or reconceptualize it, or the modernists try to redo some aspect of it, they fail because it's true, and you can't just recreate the truth in some other fashion. You can model it, but you can't just make your own truth using a mechanism. Like the thing that prohibits you is your pride. Sorry.
I think that people haven't done enough anthropological analysis of the harrowing of Hades either, which is interesting to do. I see it a little bit, maybe this is controversial for theological people, but I kind of see the harrowing of hell as a kind of, again, another meta text moment where, you think about all the people that are put into the Hades of history, the victims, right? The scapegoats. And the harrowing of Hades is kind of the emptying of all those hidden victims, including the ones of Israel's history in that story, which is interesting. I think that's a very controversial thing for some people to think about. That when you talk about,
it's why it's skipped over all the time.
Yeah, the prophets. Well, I'll say something. You get people like Achan being killed, because he took a couple pieces of silver and they stoned him. Is he a victim? Is he a sacrificial lynch victim? Was he making a choice that was wrong, but was he sacrificially lynched? And was he cast into Hades literally and then redeemed literally when Christ goes into Hades? I'm willing to throw that out there as a possibility. Yeah. Some people would get very mad at me for saying that. I understand. But that's okay. It's something I think as long as we're trying to think in the way that Christ thinks, then we're in the right direction, even if we make mistakes in how we do it. And I think it's important for us to do that because I think the biblical text, when Caiaphas says, it is better that one man die than the whole nation perish. And the text literally smacks you in the face, breaks the fourth wall and tells you, but he didn't say that of his own accord. Well, God made him say it. You get it? That's the text saying that a human couldn't have come up with such a devious revelatory sentence about what he's up to, except that God made him do it so that we would preserve it in this text for all of history to understand the sausage making of culture. You see that? It's genius, dude. It gives you chills. How can you not? The text is literally saying he didn't say this because he wanted to. God made him say it because he wanted to reveal this for you right now as you read the text. What's that?
Yeah, that's super mind-blowing, right? I'm 100% with you, David. Yeah, I definitely believe what you said as well. And that's also why it's so important to read the Bible in an anthropological way, right? The mind-blowing thing about like the sacrifice of Isaac is that was the revelation from God to show humans that you're not supposed to do human sacrifices. And the people, the average kind of secular person who reads it the opposite way around, they just don't understand how to read it in an anthropological way. Where
the interesting thing with that too is like so the Jews, the Hebrews already knew this. This had already been substantiated in the Hebrew tradition to not do human sacrifice. So it wasn't like this was like something new to Abraham, even though if God tells you to do something, you go do it, right? The reason why God has the Abraham Isaac story is like what happens immediately after that story happens. Well, the kingdom of Abraham happens. Suddenly, the word, suddenly all these people are converted to people of Judea. Like they become, the expansion of God's people happens right after that through Abraham, through his line. So he's setting the table, and he's setting the rules of the table. Like this is how this is how you're going to behave at God's table. In case you're new to this. Hey, these are the taboos. Just I'll link this to Luke Burgess, and I know we're at the hour mark, and David, you got a throat thing, and I'm feeling ill, and it's very early in the morning for Q and I, so we'll try to wrap this up a little bit. But Luke Burgess tweeted out recently, if you understand nothing else about Girard, understand this: there is no taboo that can withstand the dismantling of taboos in an apocalyptic age. Whatever used to be taboo will now be normalized. taboos, as a reminder, are constrainers of violence. And this is really key to understanding both the scapegoat mechanism and the symbolism of the cross. Like I said earlier, the cross is a symbol of violence. It's a container of violence. It's a reminder of our violence and our fallen nature and of our redemption and salvation at the same time. It is a perfect paradox. It is the Trinity, right? That you wear on your around your neck, or you have icons of, that you're reminded of, that we make the sign of the cross constantly. There's an old Bill Hicks line that says, if when Christ comes back, do you really think he wants to see everyone wearing a cross? It's a funny little bit, but yes, of course he would. Like that's his symbol. That's his representation here on earth. That brings us back to Calvary, the moment when the scapegoat mechanism is broken for us, and we have the perfect revelation, not only of the truth, but of our way forward, that we can, instead of stumbling blindly and getting little snippets of it, and through intuition, sometimes having something revealed by divine accident. Now we have a clear path. Now we have someone to model. Now we know what to do, and yet we do it imperfectly, but it's still a pathway. Sorry, David. Go ahead.
No, it's very well said. So that's one of the things that we try to emphasize on this program that we do is that, you have a lot of work to do in the world of art and science, the world of technology. Technology is always used, again, in conservative and religious circles as a negative thing typically, or it's used in the wrong way when it's used in a positive way. And I think we got to think of technology in a whole other different dimension. It's something that McLuhan is helpful for people realizing that. He doesn't speak of technology as a positive or negative. It's just something that is an extension of our senses and extends our different organs and the ratios of our sensorial experience, and how that works together, I think gives us an indication of where we're at. I think that we have not had a lot of innovation in the world of atoms precisely because we have long abandoned an anthropological emphasis of the effects of the cross. And to the extent that you and I and we all can be successful in bringing the anthropological aspect of the cross back to the forefront so that people start to grasp, oh, okay, so the reason why there's a kind of magnetism, even if I hate Trump, the reason why he gets a magnetic aura to him the more he's persecuted is because our culture is still thoroughly swimming in the fishbowl of Christianity. And so it can't help but see that, because that's the thing that has our hearts the most. And once you realize that, then you can stop fighting against it blindly, and you can start to work with it. You can start to embrace the cross and the cruciform way of solving problems, not trying to go back to Machiavelli. I mean, give me a break. It is better that one man die than the whole nation perish. There's more political insight in that sentence than anything Machiavelli or the Italian philosophers wrote. I'm sorry if you don't understand that sentence because, it's not sophisticated enough. I mean, James Burnham or whatever. You didn't get it. You just didn't get it. You're trying to come up with your own guru. That's what we all do. We want gurus that are hard to get, and Christ is not hard to get. He's extremely available, and that's why we push him away. One of the best sentences that Rene Girard ever said, he said, Christ died for us, and we can hardly give a care. Meanwhile, a supermodel walks by, and we are fixated at her glance. And he says, that's the heart of human society. The God gives up his entire life and loves you unconditionally without anything putting as an attachment. And we yawn at that. And we are fixated at the hard to get supermodel. And everything we've done with Christianity that is an error has been an attempt to add layers of a hard to get aspects to God to make him more attractive to us. Did you know that? Did you know that's why we do all these things that we do, like penal substitutionary atonement? We create these concepts because we want to find him more attractive from our perception of what attractiveness is, because we think that scarcity of love is attractive. We think that if someone's hard to get, that means they have high value. We think that if you have to climb 1,000 steps for somebody to think that you're worthy, that means that they're a great master and you're a great little student, that you climbed up 1,000 steps faster than anybody else. That's not how God is. And so we have a hard time wrapping our minds around that. I'm telling you, that's why the religions reject him. That's why Christianity rejects Jesus in some sense, aesthetically. If they did not reject him aesthetically, the left wouldn't exist. What we call the left is only something that is a reflection of Christianity proper, rejecting the aesthetic of the cross. We don't find it attractive enough. So we've abandoned it. And now the left owns it for some time, and they've done the best they could with it. Really have. They've done a good job.
Yeah, that's
interesting. We're about to enter June. Sorry, Q. I'll kick this over to you, but just one thought. We're about to enter Pride Month, and it's like the symbolic irony in that name. It's just as you're talking, David, it just really struck me is that all these inversions, like to call this thing a Pride Month is like this is literally the thing that keeps you from God, like from realizing God in your life is pride. You know, they've taken the rainbow as a symbol, right? Which is, of course, the symbol of the covenant. These inversions that I don't know if they're truly purposeful, but they become purposeful because they're anti-Christian or anti-Christ kind of nature, and it's all these people who are wrestling with God, who do not want to make the most, who do not want to be humbled, who want to attach themselves to the victim. Because they believe that as if they are the victim, they are the sacrificed. So they don't have to sacrifice. The sacrifice doesn't sacrifice. They are sacrificed.
But they get that the LGBT church was created because of ideological approaches to religion, ultimately defining them by the sin that they want to, that, you know, they do a sin and then you define someone's name by their sin. I mean, now you're just begging for a scapegoat martyr's energy to be attached to that taboo, which will then create its own martyr church energy. So the LGBTQ is just it's a Christian heretical schism, really, because it's just saying you call me a monster because of my sin, but what about your sins? And then the dialectic of the religionist, tribalistic ideologue says, yes, you're a freak, be gone. And that be gone is the expulsion energy that Jesus talks about, that the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. That in feeling as if something is unfairly expelled because of its misshapen status, like the stone, it gains its own power because it's left as the capstone, as the fulcrum, as the new source of cultural power. Because the stone the builders rejected was an idiom when they were building the temple. They had this misshapen stone. They don't have anywhere to put it in the wall. They set it off to the side. It doesn't fit. It's a misfit. It's a freak. It's a freak. It's a disgusting thing, right? They set it aside. At the end of the building project, they have this misshapen stone and say, that'll be the capstone. We'll put it at the top. And that gets all the glory when you're coming into the city. You see that. It's the highest point. Just like on the pyramid, the capstone is the top. It's the creme de la creme. So that's what Jesus is explaining, that history will unfold in that form. The good and the bad, the evil will follow in that form too. It will gain power by creating the perception of being expelled. And usually there's a bit of truth to that which they're painting, right? So the Christian should understand that and be able to enter into it proactively and dismantle that energy in a social Aikido way so as to not give it martyr's energy to create more of a dialectical schismatic effect, right? You can stop it once you understand what's happening there, right? But if you're just going to sit there and say, oh no, the stone of bitterness just talking about Jesus, that's it. Okay, if you're going to do that, you're not going to understand the mechanism by which he's describing how the gospel will infect and haunt the world. So you can either get with the haunting or fight the haunting, and the haunting will whoop you. And it'll create all these schisms that we're like busy trying to put out with the fire hose, like of, raging fires this way and that way. Oh my God, here's another freak schism. And I'm like, dude, you got to stop it at the source. Yeah. And the source is this ideological, detached, disembodied Christianity. That's the source of the LGBT movement, of all of these deviations, all these ideologies. The BLM thing is another thing. All of those things come from a detached, disembodied Christianity that doesn't want to own, coming onto the side of the marginalized. And that's where we have to return. And that, Jason, that's the good thing about the libertarians when they're at their best. Because Jesus says things that sound libertarian and liberal. He says, the sheep and the goats of history will be judged by who was there to visit me in prison. In other words, that's his marker, is what's happening to the prisoner in history. Now, you tell that to a right-wing person, they say, that's stupid, it's liberalism. Well, that's Jesus saying that. That's not, you know what I mean? Like, they're reacting to a stupidity. They're angry that their parents made mistakes, and they're reacting, like you say, a vengeful son. And a vengeful son is not someone who should be driving the car. Get him the hell out of the car. He shouldn't be driving if he's driving with road rage. He's going to drive off of a cliff.
Yeah, that's a super powerful takeaway, David. Yeah, like, and this is like something that was blowing my mind last time we had a conversation, which was when you said that the problem is the ideologies, because it takes away from Jesus being the Word made flesh. Now you're kind of making him dead now by making him no longer a living logos, but into something that's defined by a particular dead set of rules and ideas.
Yeah.
That's like something super mind blowing that's still been pondering since the last couple weeks. And another thing from what you said before about how like people want to make things more attractive by making it harder, right? That's kind of like trying to save yourselves through work, and that's why the people who turn away from Christianity are super attracted to Buddhism, because they think, oh, if I just meditate long enough, I'll get rid of my desires. I'm doing good work to earn my own salvation, because they just don't believe it's that easy to just accept Christ as your savior.
Well, it's also like you've combined. It's the. I know, David, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, about the war on differentiation. To go back to the builder stone that's rejected, when it's placed, but it's still used. When it's placed at the cornerstone, it's still, then we're exalting the differentiation. We're giving it its place. We're almost making it sacred. But we're also realizing that you can't build a structure with the differentiation. Like, you know, the misshapen stones aren't going to build a very very firm wall. So they have a place, but they cannot be the backbone, let's say, of a civilization or of a culture. They have to have their place and be respected, but yet understand that the differentiation has to exist in all of us, but there has to be a solid mass. There also has to be all those other building blocks that hold it up, so that thing can not collapse in on itself. This is where the inversion gets in, especially with Pride Month and all the rest of it, is that now you're attempting to build a building only with the differentiated, and say that and create this collective identity of the differentiated, which means it's mush. Like I use the term mush Christianity, which is kind of what Father Seraphim Rose warned about in Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, is that by incorporating all these other faiths into this into the monist kind of philosophy, even in Buddhism, well, now you've said, to remove all desires, you've created a desire to transcend desire. So you're not getting rid of all desires; you're collecting them into one desire, which Girard talks about as well, being like the most common human desire is one of transcendence. Well, even that desire for transcendence is a desire. So you haven't removed them all; you've just combined them, and consider yourself a clever little boy for doing so. But it doesn't remove that mimetic desire to be free of it, to liberate oneself from all these things, from taboos themselves. And this is, I think, key to understanding that war against differentiation, that the left, or whatever term you want to use, I don't care anymore. But that's what the modernists seem to be warring against, is this, and I've said it about individualism, is that this hyper desire to exalt the individual leads to no individualization at all. It creates this mush collective, because how else do you define yourself? If you're put man instead of God at the highest point of modeling, well, you're just going to be modeling this imperfect thing that is never defined, that is always redefined. Every generation just has the new meta man that you're supposed to be, or new meta thing. Now it's the it's not no longer man, it's no longer woman, it's
all
a
that
they,
stuff
them.
all that stuff is a dream that'll go by, Jason. Don't.
Of course,
That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm not obsessed about it, but I think it's
It will go
important
by.
to
I would, we have to move beyond it. This is all a distraction. These are children's games. Right. They're trying to distract us. This Gnostic stuff will go away. I'm telling you, if we start to do signs and wonders in the world of atoms again, it will reclaim culturally the truth of what's been driving things the good in history all along, which is Christianity. And Richard Dawkins is a fool against Rene Girard. Rene Girard is way beyond Richard Dawkins in terms of the intellectual sophistication. The future of intellectual ideas, it belongs again to Christ. It always has. And we need to act that out now. And the conservatives, we really have to get to work taking care of people where they're at. Why does someone get picked on because they're gender confused? There's a lot of people that get molested. There's a lot of people that get disbanded from their father. And if conservatives don't have a sensitive, empathetic spirit to that and just say, you're a freak, you're a weirdo, that shame is what is the expulsion energy that then becomes the dialectical fuel for this powerful victimist religion that looks like Christianity, because victimism is basically an angry attempt to say Christianity has failed us, so therefore we shall do it the satanic way, which is to accuse those who have hurt us. And the Christian answer is not to say, no, you're an ugly freak. That's what the right does. Really, that's what they do. That's all they can do. That's why they're fools when they say, oh, Trump's worst thing he ever did was his Criminal Justice Reform Act. How garbage is that? Let me tell you something. They don't know what's like. These guys that say that, they all live in DC think tanks, or they live over in the Silicon Valley. These are rich kids. They never hardly have, any of them have anybody that's been to prison. I've spent years working with people with decades and decades being in prison. There's a lot of people, to the tune of millions of people of all races, that have been screwed over by this justice system. So it's not a cool, tough guy to say we should lock people up for longer. That's a nanny state. That's not even, first of all, even on their own standard of toughness, that's not tough. That's just a giant nanny program. We'll put them in the belly of mama government longer. That'll fix them. How stupid and impotent your tough guy conservatism is. Number two, look what's happening right now. Hispanics, blacks, they're starting to look at Trump. They're saying, wait a sec, I've been told all my life that the rich white man, the justice system works for him and not for me. And then they're saying, damn, the biggest icon of rich white manism is getting screwed. This is an apocalyptic doing by God. He's revealing to these people right now. He's bringing peace. If you see it, you'll see how beautiful this is. He's, for the first time, allowing people to see their mythologies are falling apart. Wait a second. If they're screwing over the icon of rich white man power, that means it's not just about the blacks being persecuted. Wait a second. Now I have more solidarity with the white. Now I have more So now you're healing. That's what Christianity does. We need to lean into that, not go against it. Here's what the right the stupid right says. Well, you just wait till we get power. We're going to arrest them all too. Well, okay, now you're ruining it. You're ruining. That's not what Jesus does. That's not how Peter made the gospel spread all over the Mediterranean. He didn't get up there in Acts and say, "You guys crucified my Lord and Savior Jesus, and when we come back, we're going to whoop your ass so hard you won't know what happened to you." He didn't say that. That's what the stupid little Caesars on the right do, because they don't follow Christ. They follow their own tail.
What I said is the cure, let's say, or the remedy for the vengeful son, the spirit of the vengeful son, which I believe will be the spirit of this age coming forward. And there's very little we can do to stop it. But the one thing we can do to counteract it is by embodying the story of the prodigal son, to return to the father, to be redeemed by the father, by the capital F Father. And in that sense, then our job will be to turn around and redeem our dads and become and beget a generation of to stop this inversion process, of this shadow process, and that we've been suffering from, basically the entire 20th century. So we can actually put the 20th century to bed, and hopefully the future generations will be the redeeming father. Will be symbols of the redeeming father that can then go through and start to undo this damage left by the imperfect scapegoat mechanism. And just as you're saying, David, to go to all these people and go, no, 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 we got to stop blaming everyone. We have to stop. We have to stop essentially socially castrating everybody and redeem them within the body of Christ. And then that's how you get, I know the boogie word, Christian nationalism. If you want a Christian nation, you have to become Christians, and you have to start acting as Christians and being Christians, and not just in name or in Sunday worship, but every single day in every single moment of your life. And part of that process is the redemption process. Like
Right.
these things cannot be separated. We've gone over the hour, folks. Q, any last thoughts? We'll do a little bit of wrap up.
Yeah.
And then we'll,
Yeah. So recognizing the scapegoat mechanism, right? That's really the real 5D chess move. Because I see a lot of people on the right who are now praising Islam. And for a while, I was thinking maybe that's a good idea as well. But what you actually end up seeing is that the Muslims, they are just like the ideological forms of the Christians who like to scapegoat the LGBT, the BLM, and all that. And when they do that scapegoating, they end up just amplifying the other side even more. So Islam is not going to save the West. They're just going to amplify the power of the LGBT and BLM even more than it is happening now, because they're even more extreme in their violence. And what you see, like I'm here in Bali right now in Indonesia, and there's a lot of Muslims here. And what you see is like walking around, like all these like gays and trans you see here, they're all Muslims. They're all either still practicing Islam or they're ex-Muslims. Like that, Islam is not solving any of those problems.
Yeah. Yep. It just goes underground.
Mm-hmm.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. This was good. I was bemoaning myself a little bit. I was feeling very world weary the last few weeks. Sometimes it just gets you, especially if you become terminally online and you start dealing with this stuff on a day-to-day basis. It can get overwhelming. Sometimes it can get a little I don't almost like saying depressing, but wearisome. Well, I prefer that term. And then a conversation like these happen, and suddenly I'm rejuvenated. Like suddenly it's like, oh yes, remember why you started doing this bloody thing in the first place? Like these are the reasons why. So I thank you very, very much.
Great, and you've really grown very fast with your program. I'm very impressed, Jason.
Thank you, David. Well, it's because of guests like yourself and MMAC Value and many others, and of course supporters in the audience. This is not a solo project, even though I'm doing it by myself now. It's a contribution of many different voices. So as we weave our way through the tapestry and try to challenge narratives and construct new ones, or at least return us to absolute true narratives, which again is why I started this, as a desire to break the liberal frame, and then encountered orthodoxy and going, I don't have to break anything. You can be made whole again through the church, and so I try to pepper that in with the work as much as I can, in my own little imperfect way. But
I mean, look at the influence of what we call liberalism. I mean, you living in, where are you at? Indonesia or Australia, wherever you guys are.
I'm in Western Australia. Yeah.
These places were not very nice before. I mean, it wasn't very hospitable to different people thinking differently until so-called Christian liberalism spread over to those places, right? I mean, it makes a difference. It makes a difference in terms of being. I just did a show with somebody that lives in China talking about Rene Girard. I said, you're going to talk about the scapegoat mechanism of the CCP? He said, nope, I still want to live here. So we still got some work to do in China. But you see what I mean? Look at the effect of the gospel. You call it liberal, but I enjoy having the freedom of speech. I enjoy having the freedom to own a weapon. I enjoy to have the freedom of association. And I understand that they have a stupid idea about how those freedoms were developed, but we can chew the fish and spit out the bones and build something more beautiful,
Yeah, and that's the project. I think that's really the heart of the project. Is not so much that I'm here to destroy liberalism and erase it. I don't think that's even possible. But I don't think it would be good a good idea to do it. It's I think you kind of alluded to this before, and I've had an open challenge with many let's say based Christians with this, is that, well, if everything is part of God's plan, then this too is part of God's plan. You know, and by your rejection of your current situation, or let's say the meta that is currently affecting the world, that's pride. That's you saying that I don't like this. This doesn't serve me. This makes me feel awful. I don't like it. So you're criticizing God. You know, this is a constant refrain I put in my mind, even when I'm criticizing other people or making fun of other people. Like there's these allowances you give yourself sometimes because you get lost in it, right? But ultimately, it's like, if this is God's creation, then you're being critical of God's creation, and who the fuck are you to do that? Like, how do you know? Like, what do you know about this person? What do you know what they've suffered, or what has gone into the creation of them? You know, and yes, we can certainly criticize Hillary Clinton just to have a name, you know, or the demonic transy kid personality that is obviously grooming children. That, yes, there are obvious things that we can criticize and point out and say that this is wrong, or this is devious, this is wicked. But at the same time, we also have to allow. We also have to soften our hearts to a point where we can forgive them, and have at least the possibility of forgiveness there, because without it, well, we just become, like I said, the spirit of the vengeful son. The danger of it that I perceive is that it will feel good to many of us when we start to see bad people, quote unquote, get what they deserve, quote unquote, right? And you know, if my predictions is true, we're entering an age of total violence, which is not just going to be kinetic, but there will be kinetic violence, but it'll be totalizing. So it'll be a constant attack on everything and everyone at all times. It'll go from the Cold War into a hot war. The spiritual war will get hot, and the only thing that we can do, as people who realize this, like I said, is to embody the spirit of the story of the prodigal son, and come to the Father, be redeemed, try to be redeemed by the Father, and the only way you can do that is through humility. Like by modeling that alone. And just in behavior and in presentation, I think we open doors and windows. We allow for a path forward for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. It's hopeful, and it's the only thing it's all I got. Sorry, folks. Like, God has only given me so many gifts, and I run with the ones I'm given. So. We're going to go with that one and see where it ends. Gentlemen, thank you very much again. Let everyone know where they can get a hold of you, get a hold of your work, follow you on X and socials and all the other things, and we will sign out.
Yeah. So basically, to add on to what you just said earlier, just remember Ecclesiastes: nothing is new under the sun. So whatever we're facing today that you might not like, it's gonna pass. And also, people have faced similar situations before. So, and Christ is the living logos, and Christianity is the religion of the future. So you have to have faith in an optimistic future. Yeah, and you can find me on X at return to mimetic. That's 2 the number, and also on Substack at mimetic.substack.com.
You can at David Gornoski, and neighborschoice.com is our website, and appreciate what you guys are doing, and we're going to have a great time, and we got to do a lot of great stuff. We got to make a lot of beautiful art. We got to make businesses that are beautiful. We got to make families that are beautiful. We got to have homes that are beautiful. We got food that's beautiful. Everything just needs to be as much beauty as we can possibly surround ourselves, because Jesus is winning in history, and I don't think it doesn't have to be that cataclysmic. And I think that, with what you see happening right now, people can learn to get along with one another and figure out another way to get outside of this system. There's not really that much of this stuff that is inevitable, that it has to harm us when it collapses. We can get out from underneath its yoke, I think, relatively easy, you know, staying out of the debt system and learning not to chase after what the Joneses have. You know, it's okay to have a small, humble dwelling space. You know, if you need to do that, that way you don't get destroyed when there's a debt crisis. And it's okay to stop trying to, you know, don't listen to these liars that tell you that you have to have identity politics around ethnicity. That's not what a Christian does. I'm sorry. That's just wrong. That's wrong.
Yeah.
And you can have respect for yourself. No one's telling you ever. You can respect your ethnicity. You can respect your traditions and your rituals of your culture. That's fine. But the idea that that should be your salvation instead of Christ is ridiculous. And Christ, you know, teaches us to go after the Samaritan, and that's not a cute little pie in the sky thing. That's an affront to your sense of safety and security by its nature. I told that to a guest recently. I said, "What about the Good Samaritan story has anything to do with Carl Schmitt's friend-enemy distinction?" The Good Samaritan rips that apart, really. He said, well, there's a difference between a public enemy and a private enemy. I said, well, who's the public enemy? It was anybody who wants to do harm against you. Well, do you think the Samaritans were considered to be a public enemy by Jesus' tribe at the time? And you don't think he didn't know that when he told that story? You think he didn't think that would be something that his own fellow tribe would have a concern for? You know, those guys hate our guts. You know, those guys think our God's not real. You know, those guys would sell us out for pennies. And you want us to go risk our lives to save one of them? Wait, you're saying they would do that for us? That we should be like that? Oh my goodness. Where's my friend-enemy distinction when I need it? I'll read Carl Schmitt instead of Jesus. Give me a break. These little Schmittians. They're just scared, man. These guys are scared. They're scared because they don't want to, you know, following Christ is scary. I mean, it's scary to walk on water, man. I'm not saying that like that's easy, okay? It's scary to walk on water, and it's scary to have the faith that Q does. He's in the middle of God knows where and don't know where he's surrounded by, the temptations intellectually, the temptations that he is undergoing, and he's just walking that path. You know what I mean? He's got a bright future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Gentlemen, thanks again.
Faith.
Take care. God bless.
Stick around, boys. We're going to do the outro, and we'll vamp a little bit afterwards. And again, thank you everyone who's watching and listening. Like, subscribe, do the things. And we will be back next week. Again, love you all. Appreciate it. And here we go.